You know that person whose phone barely lights up on a Friday night? They have maybe 2 or 3 people they'd actually call if something went wrong. Their weekends are quiet. They turn down most invitations, not because they're rude, but because they genuinely don't feel the pull to be everywhere with everyone. They have a small circle, and somehow they seem completely fine with it. Meanwhile, everybody around them seems to be collecting people. Hundreds of contacts, dozens of group chats, followers, networking events, a calendar that never breathes. And every time someone notices their quiet social life, they ask the same question. Why don't you put yourself out there more? What's interesting is that many of these people aren't lonely at all. They chose this. And psychology says that choice usually has very little to do with being unlikable. Because having very few friends says something much deeper about the person behind that quiet phone. Modern culture trains people to measure themselves by numbers. Followers, likes, connections, invitations. Somewhere along the way, social quantity became social proof. The more people who know your name, the more successful you must be. We started treating relationships like a collection, something to grow, something to display. And a person with a small circle started looking suspicious. Surely something must be wrong with them. Surely they failed socially somehow. But that assumption misses something the most emotionally grounded people already understand. More people does not mean more connection. Sometimes it means the exact opposite. Researchers studying friendship found something fascinating about human capacity. An anthropologist named Robin Dunbar discovered that the human brain can only maintain a limited number of genuinely close relationships at one time. Not hundreds, a handful. The inner circle of people we truly trust is naturally tiny, usually no more than 5. In simple words, deep connection has a ceiling. The human mind was never built to be emotionally intimate with everyone. So the person with very few friends isn't broken. They're often just being honest about a limit everyone has but most people ignore. They stopped spreading themselves thin. They poured their energy into the few relationships that actually matter. And this is where it gets psychologically interesting. Because investing deeply in a few people requires something most social butterflies never develop. Presence. When you only have a handful of close relationships, you show up differently. You remember the details. You notice when something feels off. You're actually there. Think about it. The person with 200 casual friends knows 200 surface stories. The person with 3 real friends knows everything. The fears, the history, the version of someone that exists behind closed doors. One of those is connection. The other is just contact. There's also a quieter truth underneath this. People with very few friends often have a strong sense of emotional security. They don't need a crowd to feel like they exist. Most people feel anxious in silence. They fill every empty moment with noise, plans, people, anything to avoid being alone with themselves. But the person with a small circle made peace with solitude a long time ago. Psychologists draw a sharp line between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected. Solitude is the comfort of being alone by choice. And research consistently shows that people who are comfortable in solitude tend to report higher emotional stability and lower anxiety. Because they stopped outsourcing their sense of worth to other people's attention. That's rare. Modern life runs on validation. Notifications, reactions, being seen, being included. Most people feel a small sting when they're left out of something. But the person with few friends slowly stopped flinching at that. They no longer need to be invited everywhere to feel valuable. And something powerful happens when a person stops needing constant social approval. They become much harder to influence. They stop performing relationships. They stop saying yes out of fear. They stop maintaining connections that quietly drain them just to avoid looking alone. They become, in a strange way, free. There's another layer here that almost nobody talks about. Energy. Every relationship costs something. Time, attention, emotional bandwidth. And many people with small circles are simply more aware of that cost. Researchers studying decision fatigue found that the human brain has a limited amount of mental energy each day, and every interaction quietly spends some of it. The more people you try to keep up with, the more fragmented your attention becomes. So some people make a quiet decision. Instead of maintaining 20 shallow relationships, they protect their energy for the few that refill them instead of draining them. That's not antisocial. That's selective. There's a difference between someone who can't connect and someone who simply refuses to waste their connection on people who don't truly value it. And honestly, that selectivity often comes from experience. Most people with few friends didn't start that way. They had bigger circles once. They learned, sometimes painfully, the difference between people who stay and people who disappear the moment they're no longer useful. They learned what it feels like to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. So they stopped chasing quantity. They stopped trying to be liked by everyone. They realized that being known by a few people is worth more than being recognized by many. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom earned the hard way. This is also why the friendships these people do keep tend to last for decades. While the world cycles through disposable connections, networking contacts, convenient friends, situational relationships that fade the moment circumstances change, the person with a small circle is quietly building something permanent. The friend who has known them for 20 years. The one who remembers who they used to be. The one who shows up without being asked. Researchers studying long-term relationships found that the depth and longevity of a few close bonds predict emotional well-being far more than the sheer number of social connections a person has. In other words, it was never about how many people knew you. It was always about how deeply a few of them did. Of course, society rarely sees it that way. Modern culture often mistakes a small social circle for failure. If someone isn't constantly surrounded by people, we assume they're awkward, difficult, or lonely. But psychologically, choosing a small circle often requires more confidence than collecting a large one. Because keeping few friends means becoming comfortable with people misreading you. It means accepting that some will assume the worst. It means valuing your own peace more than your public image. In a world obsessed with being seen, quietly choosing depth over display says, I don't need an audience to feel whole. And after years of noise, many people slowly arrive at the same realization. They stop chasing excitement in their relationships and start chasing peace. A huge social life creates stimulation. A small, trusted circle creates calm. New people mean new uncertainty, new performance, new emotional labor. The few who already know you require none of that. No proving yourself. No pretending. Just familiarity. And as people get older, many quietly begin optimizing their lives around emotional peace instead of social volume. Eventually, some people reach a point where they ask a dangerous question. What if I don't need more people? What if I just need the right ones? That question changes everything. Because the moment someone genuinely stops fearing a small circle, the pressure to be liked by everyone loses its grip. They stop measuring their worth in invitations. They stop counting friends like trophies. And they start experiencing relationships the way they were always meant to be experienced. Fully, deeply, without performance. So maybe that's the real psychology behind people with very few friends. It's not social failure. It's not bitterness. It's not an inability to connect. Sometimes it's emotional security. Sometimes it's hard-earned wisdom. Sometimes it's the quiet confidence to protect your energy. And sometimes it's simply a person realizing that life became much calmer the moment they stopped trying to be everyone's friend and started being deeply present for the few who actually matter. To most people, a quiet phone on a Friday night looks like loneliness. But to the person holding it, that quiet often means something completely different. It means peace. It means they finally stopped searching for their worth in a crowd. And in a world constantly telling people that more connections mean a better life, keeping a small, honest circle might quietly be one of the strongest signs that someone learned what connection actually means. Before you go, I want to ask you something. How many people would you call if everything fell apart tomorrow? And honestly, would you trade your small circle for a bigger one?